Welcome, everybody, to the Dan Patrick Show. I am not Dan Patrick, but clearly the war of words between Chris Sims and myself came with a winner. It's the guy sitting in the big chair, everybody. Chris Sims isn't sitting here, I'm just saying, all right? I don't usually listen to a lot of what any of the other analysts have to say because I don't want my, analysis swayed in any way. What makes Chris Sims so good, what makes, I think, Dan so good, and let's say Nick Wright, is when they say it, they believe it. We believe it because that's what we've interpreted, and that's why we're good. Doesn't mean we're always right. But clearly I am right in this instance because I am sitting in for Dan Patrick today here on the show. I think a lot of people just assume that I've guest hosted the show before, fellas.
You've been in here 15 times.
Yeah, I've been doing this show for probably 15 years, okay? There was a little hiatus there in 2012 to 2014. We won't talk about that. But I wasn't able to call at that time to be on, and there wasn't any Zoom and everything like that. But I think people just assume that. But it hasn't happened. This is the first time. This is like, and I love this part that Paulie said to me, this is like the McNown brothers, 12, 14 years in the league, and all of a sudden, Gary Kubiak steps to the forefront. And, Luke, Josh, it's your time.
You're like Crash Davis. You're waiting to get called up after a lot of years in the minors.
And sure enough, I get the opportunity. I think that there is probably a lot of, how is that possible? Usually when I come on the show and talk about Caleb Williams and the fashion in which I did, it's like, what does he know? Well, there's something to be said for that, and I think Dan got into it yesterday a little bit. I've probably forgotten more football than most people know, okay? I don't care if you don't think I was successful in the NFL. I frankly didn't think I was that successful in the NFL. But I am going to put one thing to rest today. Every March, every April, the consensus around who's going to be great, who's not going to be great, but they always like to come back to, and I think it's a big reason why my name will never go away, is like we don't want to draft another Ryan Leaf possibly. So instead of having any more polls, and I'm sorry, Seton, this may end your polls for March.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're just about to get into Ryan Leaf season.
Yes.
We said kind of dabbled in it yesterday, but now.
Yeah, we're putting the kibosh to it.
Yeah,
It's over now, all right? There's no more, who's the biggest bust of all time. You don't have to drag any of the names in there anymore, all right? Let's just say it's me, okay? From now on. It's just like, you don't have to have an argument around who's the greatest basketball player of all time. It's Michael Jordan, okay? We don't need to talk LeBron. Yeah, it's great, but we don't have to have that conversation anymore. We know what's true. And what we know is true is this. So we don't have to talk about anybody else. So, all the Twitterverse or X, when you want to do polls about that around draft time, you don't have to do it anymore. There could be a GIF. There could be a meme. Let's make one up that just now is just a post of that.
You're the Usain Bolt of this situation.
I am the greatest of all time.
Are you taking ownership right now of?
Well, I feel like I've taken ownership for a long time of it. People just haven't been willing to accept it.
Yeah.
So if you look at your situation, Ryan, as a person who knows you, the reason you are always in that conversation of the biggest bust of all time is because of the draft and who was drafted ahead of you. Imagine if you were drafted 1 and Peyton were drafted 2. And it would be an even bigger situation because it's a little bit like, I would say there's contenders. Jamarcus Russell is one of the biggest busts of all time.
Well, there's a lot of money there.
Yes.
And I think he was uber talented. And I think there's been I think he's got a bit of mystery behind him. Kind of disappeared. Ryan just flat out got in your face everybody all the time, whether it was good or bad. Like, oh, dude's out there. He's warranting maybe that badge he's wearing.
But let's look at the NBA equivalent. Greg Oden was taken number 1. Kevin Durant was taken number 2. They're intertwined. It makes Greg Oden look worse because he didn't do much, mostly because of injury.
Mostly because of injuries.
And then then Kevin Durant is a first ballot Hall of Famer. If Peyton Manning is average, you don't get nearly as much coverage.
Most likely, and it's usually a part of when I'm out there speaking. I talk about it. I say, when I walked out of prison, I think my biggest fear was that I would have to be in the public eye. Because the day after I walked out, I was sitting at home, and I should be just grateful and thankful and everything. I slept in a real bed for the first time. Mom made some breakfast, but in the hometown newspaper, in the Great Falls Tribune, where I was supposed to be the hero, right? The guy the only Montanan who's ever been drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. But instead I have become this, this person. And there was a cartoon in the paper, and it went, "Lock up your medicine cabinets, Ryan Leaf's out." And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, there's no hope. This is what my life is. And so I had to think differently. Like there had to be a 180-degree different kind of thought process around that. And it really was ultimately a mindset of ownership. And I found that in the accountability piece when I was in there. Like when I walked by the mirror one time, I just said, "Ryan, you're here because of what you did, no one else." And once you do that, once you say that, like you can't blame anybody else. I mean, it's the simplest fact of it all. Like it doesn't matter what someone said, did, thought, this or that. What was my part in it? And that has been like a real sticking point for me over the last 10 years. Plain and simple. We as human beings tend to just complicate things so immensely rather than, doing the simplest thing. And that was just to own it. So no more polls around that. All right.
Ever?
So, ever. No more polls. It doesn't need to be done. It's done. It's written, and it's now like we're going to do history later, right? History of sports on this date.
Yeah.
On this date in 2024, it was resolved. Ryan Leaf was the NFL's biggest bust of all time. Doesn't have to be talked about again. Well, you can. You can just always reference me. Doesn't have to be talked about anybody. You don't have to drag any of my friends into it, okay? Buddies that I've made. You don't have to talk about Timmy Couch at all, ever. Ever again. You don't got to talk about Jamarcus Russell. No. Let them live in peace, okay? That's the part of all we're getting to here.
This feels like a big day. Big day for you. Hey, congratulations, buddy. You earned it.
There's many.
You earned it, Ryan. Well done, pal.
Thank you. There's got to be some sort of memorabilia award in here for that.